Welcome to the Cookbook, where we invite guests on to share the ingredients of what has helped make them the successes that they are. All of it, the good, the not so good. You're not going to find anything half-baked here. And our kitchen gets messy sometimes. That's when the fun starts. So come on and join us. Okay, so hey, there are times when we all could use a little extra help and support in our lives. Whether there's something you're struggling with or just seeking connection with other people who understand what it's like to be in your situation, Anovia Behavioral Health can help. Anovia is a subscription-based organization that provides unlimited access to a wide variety of educational, experiential, and therapeutic support groups that are led by live expert facilitators. Now, you can get 20% off your membership with the discount code Cookbook20 when you subscribe. Check it out today at AnoviaBH.com. Anovia, feel better. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Cookbook. I'm Iris Goldfeder, your host, and I know I always say that I'm excited about my guests, and I'm always excited about all of my guests, but today I am like ridiculously over the moon excited about my guest, Anita Finlay. Anita and I met in 2000, I think 7 or 8. And we became really good friends, and we kind of lost touch in between, but we are reconnected. She is an amazing human. She's one of my favorite people. I'm so happy that we're reconnected. I'm going to read her bio and bring her on, and you can see just how amazing she is. So, Anita Finlay's latest book, You Ruined My Life and You Stole My Bra, is the moving, hilarious memoir of one woman's epic struggle to heal her relationship with her mother, and in the process, find the voice she had been taught to suppress. This book, y'all, is, God, it's so good. Anyway, Anita's first book, 30 Words on Clean Skin, #1 on Amazon's Women in Politics book for 16 weeks, is a shocking expose examining the bias that plagues women who dare to lead. Part of the Clinton Presidential Library, 30 Words on Clean Skin shares Anita's unlikely and inspiring odyssey, unearthing a society not as evolved as advertised. Anita has been interviewed by over 120 different TV and radio programs and prominent news magazines, including U.S. News and World Report and MSNBC. A successful actor, Anita Finlay has worked primarily in television for over 25 years, on series such as Grey's Anatomy, General Hospital, Perception, Euphoria, For All Mankind, Castle, Brothers and Sisters, 24, Hannah Montana, Boston Legal, Gilmore Girls, 6 Feet Under, The Division, For Your Love, and Judging Amy. She is best known for her 7-year stint on The Young and Restless as Dr. Nora Thompson, and I always go, oh, Nora. Anita has done scores of commercial campaigns and worked in the theater as a solo artist, writing and performing The Devil Takes a Wife to acclaim in Los Angeles theaters. Visit Anita's website at www.anitafinlay.com. That's FINLAY.com. So without further ado, let's meet Anita. Hello.
Iris, how are you? Thank you for that lovely intro. It's so nice to be here with you.
It is so nice to be here.
All the way around the country. I marvel at this. Well, I marvel at the fact that there's so many people that I work with. There's so many people I work with today who, we've either never met or we live across the country from each other, and the internet solves so many problems. I mean, it's nice to be able to feel connected, even though we're far away.
Yes, absolutely. But we're going to be visiting you soon when you move, so that's, another story. But
please,
but what I find is, I have clients around the country now, because of COVID. Because when COVID hit, Heather is an essential worker, and I was stuck at home. And, we used to joke when you'd call and you'd be like, I'm so lonely. Well, I was losing my mind because I couldn't connect with people. So I found this online community, a bunch of different networkers and marketers and, the whole thing. And so now I have clients around the country, locally, and now I have this podcast. And so
I love that you're doing this podcast. This is fantastic. But it's the same thing that you're talking about. I mean, my editor for You Ruined My Life and You Stole My Bra, she lives in New York. We've never met. We've also known each other for a dozen years. So, I think more and more people are finding out. I love it because it means that your network is automatically bigger. And you don't have to restrict yourself to just somebody who lives down the block from you. And I think that sense of community is great.
Right. I agree with that 100%. Okay. So your book, full disclosure, I just finished it today. And I know I called you after I was done. And hang on, I just want to do this really fast. Okay. I called you when it was done because it was so good. And I called you crying and you thought something was wrong. So, but your book is such a tribute to your mom and your relationship and to your growth as a human. And it's just amazing. So let's talk about it a little bit.
Okay. What would you like to know? I'm going to leave.
Well, I don't want to give any secrets away, so we're not going to do any of that. But
then I'll take the lead on this, and
yeah, take the lead.
Maybe I'll open with something that people ask me all the time. Since you ruined my life and you stole my bra came out, a lot of people ask why I wrote the book in the first place, or how would one go about writing a memoir? I mean, what would make something like that successful, or a successful endeavor? And what I tell them is, when you're writing anything like this, you've got to have a big enough why. What's driving you to write it in the first place? And I guess my biggest reason was because my mother and I had always been so close, but we had a lifelong contentious relationship. And you'll find out why if you read the book. But becoming my mother's mother, our dynamic automatically had to change. This is a woman who, unusual for the time, she was the sole breadwinner, taking care of a sick husband and 2 girls, and she was taking care of a family of 4, working 60 hours a week. And so she worked well into her 70s, and for her to then feel like she was losing her autonomy to her child, that was a very uncomfortable place for her to be. And the arguments we were having, or just the set tos, made it so that we had to find a way to reinvent our relationship. Certainly the stress I had from it, I couldn't do anymore. So I think my biggest why for writing this was that we needed to heal. And I felt like I was carrying so many ghosts around with me from a difficult upbringing. And only by stepping back and reliving those pivotal experiences and then possibly viewing her another way was I able to heal. And so that brings me to probably the second reason I wrote it, which is that there are millions of people out there who are caregivers. There are millions of women and men who wind up being caregivers to an elderly parent. And like me, they feel like they're dropped on their head. I certainly was. I felt like I'd been thrown into the deep end of the pool. I had no idea how to do this. So, my philosophy in writing it was, if you take my hand and you go on this journey with me, I promise I won't let go of yours. And we're going to come out of this better for having gone through the journey on the other end. And I think probably the last mini reason for me writing it, and this is not a major thing, but just because no matter what the ups and downs of my relationship with her, I love my mother so dearly, and it just always burned me. I wrote about her everyday bravery. I like telling women's stories, and it really made me crazy that she was unsung, that nobody would know her, because as you discovered from reading the book, she's quite an eccentric character. And so I wanted people to also get to experience her, And now people would meet my mother and she's like, "Call me Tony." I mean, she just had this wonderful accent and way about her. There was just a lilt to the woman. And I think there was something very unique about her. So it was really a pleasure to share her. I'm glad to get to share her with the world.
Yeah, and you definitely share her, and I love, and we kind of talked about this as far as, how you wrote her accent, because that just added another layer to who she was, and with the V in front of the W. So I'm like in my head going, what do you want? I'm reading. So it made her even that much more real, I think. But I think the really cool,
I'm glad.
you said that you had you always loved your mother and you guys were, always close, but you had a contentious relationship. And I relate to that so much. The difference is that my mom, when I became the caregiver, it was only a few months. So I didn't get to experience all of that. But we did make our peace the year before she passed. So I was very grateful for that. But your whole journey is making peace. I mean, the whole journey is, without giving it away, I think I don't want to give this away, but her realizing her vulnerability, which must have been hard as hell on her because she was such a powerhouse.
Yes.
And then you seeing her becoming vulnerable. I mean, all of it was just, and you're right. You hold our hand through the entire thing. I mean, I remember I got to like 5 chapters before and I was like stealing myself for what was coming, right? I was like going, okay, I know, whatever's, coming, I'm going to be strong and I'm going to get through this with you because you were going through hell. So, and David, okay, I'm sorry. I would have loved a video of the conversation that he had with her when he was at,
that's very sweet. Well, something, I think I tried to make the book as visual as possible so that I like what is visual. I like what's visceral. I like words that, wake you up. And I think that it is a visceral journey. And I think also it's meant to be a cathartic one. And yes, it's funny, it's moving, it's a lot of things, but I think it is cathartic because there were a lot of things that I'm still discovering about my mom. And I was able to accomplish the book's healing mission by writing it. So, that is like sort of another perk that I didn't expect. But I think that that's true for a lot of people because, I was fortunate to have my mom for a really long time, but our caregiving journey lasted in one way or another for many, many years. And I think that it's something, there's certain things, I guess what I'm saying is you can also do that in absentia. So even if you're someone who's reading the book and you lost a parent a long time ago, the hope is that by reading this or looking at how I learned or relearned to look at her or see her vulnerability and see that, for example, let me give you a specific example. My mom was a very attractive woman. And I think also because of her time, I mean, she was born in 1926, the only approbation she had was for her beauty and her singing ability in that order. So to her, her beauty, her attractiveness, her fastidious appearance, all of that was everything to her. So since I somewhat resemble my mother, you bet I was graded on the same scale. So if I had to see her, it was like, oh, that's nice hair, nice makeup. It's like, what was I doing right? What was I doing wrong? So I would take that personally, like she must think I'm ugly or something. And it took me a really long time to step back and see her for the insecure person she was. So I could say, wait a minute, she's just projecting her insecurity onto me. And as soon as I was able to do that, but I had to go, it's like that old saying about the only way out is through. I had to go through that experience with her when I brought her out to LA to live near me. And I finally saw her differently. I stopped being this angry 15-year-old reacting to a 47-year-old mercurial workhorse. I started to see her as somebody who herself was very afraid of being graded. So when I was able to see that, then I could separate a little bit and look at myself differently and feel like, wait a minute, she doesn't dictate how I'm attractive or why I am or what's okay or how I have to dress or who I have to be. And I just said, take back your projections. But I had to go through those experiences with her to figure that out. And I think that's true of a lot of people, whether it's about a similar talent you share or your parent is insecure because you've chosen a career that they don't like. I mean, that was true of me becoming an actor too. And you're talking about being an entrepreneur out there. I mean, that's a difficult road because welcome to the world of freelancing, That's a tough thing because you've got to be so self-motivated. Yeah. I mean, when I wrote my first book, it was like the job that ate my brain. how am I going to make a success out of this? And I think that that's another way that people feel like they're thrown in on their head, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, the entrepreneur part, it's funny because freelance is so different. Freelance is like, you do a job here and there and, whatever. When you become an entrepreneur and then you have like a business, it changes everything because now you have to worry about all the things. You have to worry about the accounting and who's going to handle, the calendar when it gets to be too much. Like I have an executive assistant now because I can't handle my calendar, which is insane. But, I never thought in a million years I'd be here, but I can't even handle my calendar because it's like that. It's just that, kind of crazy. But you went from, you were working, I guess, in a law firm, and then you left that to do acting, and then you you didn't leave acting to write the book. You kind of wrote the book while you were still doing gigs, but then you really started just focusing on writing. So do you miss any of that? Like, do you miss do you prefer writing over the other stuff?
Something, when I started, when I was a little kid, I don't know why I said this. I said at 5 years old, I wanted to be an actor. I couldn't tell you why. It was just something that was an unconscious desire. And I spent my teenage years denying it because, of course, I went to some heavy academic school, but my parents didn't want me to become an actor for obvious reasons. They just felt like there's, as my mother used to say, there's heartbreak around every corner, so I didn't want to do that. But once I got to college, I started college early at 16. And my first theater class, even though I stayed with academia, I couldn't help myself. And I started pursuing life as an actor. But the thing is that I didn't remember until later that I loved writing. And when I was 11 years old, I used to write as well. I wrote a potboiler. You'll get this, is something you don't know. I wrote a potboiler when I was in the 6th grade called Invitation to Death. And it was about my sister and I who get invited to some haunted house. It was very derivative, but it was put on before the entire assembly in school and was very successful with me in one of the leads. So I didn't realize until I was back in my mid-30s. Yeah, when I was in my mid-30s, I wound up having an acting teacher who gave me the advice. She said, be entrepreneurial and create your own material. I had also gotten that advice from my favorite college professor, Ray Gasper, said the same thing to me, but I was too numb and too inexperienced to be able to take that advice. So while I had started working regularly, I worked in New York doing a lot of theater and stuff like that, but I was struggling to get by and, doing side gigs as a secretary, as most people, find they have to do a side gig of something. And then when I moved out to LA at around 30 and started working in TV regularly, it was when I was in my mid-30s, I started writing solo material. And I reconnected with that love of writing. So in answer to your question, it's not like it's one thing or the other. I think one thing feeds the other. But, when I wrote my first book, I just got sucked into a whole different world that was much more political. And for a while I was toying with the idea of becoming a pundit. I really, and I was able to make that a success. And that was really being an entrepreneur. But I really respect what you're doing as a businesswoman and doing this podcast, because you're running a business. It's all you. I mean, yes, you assemble a team, but if you're not totally self-motivated and balancing, all those the plates in the air, it's not going to happen.
No.
So it's not like I stopped loving acting. I always will. But I think that the appeal of writing to me is that at the end of the day, wait, there's more. Here it is. You have a physical product. How happy it makes me that I can touch this, and this is something that represents a part of my life that, here, let me get this on camera. It's a part of my life that was so important to me that I get to share with other people. So I think that's the joy of writing, and I get to be very independent. I don't have to wait for anybody to show up for rehearsal. I don't have to schlep anywhere. I don't have to put on makeup. I don't have to wear mascara. You know what I mean? You
don't have to wear pants.
Oh, you don't have to wear pants. Did you have to say that out loud? But yeah, that's true too.
I'm waiting for David to come across the screen again. So,
No. I know. My husband likes to photobomb Iris and I if we're doing a Skype conversation, and he likes to wear pants, but he won't wear a shirt. So you only see him from the waist up, and you think, how is he walking across
doing out there?
I assure you, my husband does have his pants on.
That's just so funny.
I hope this is entertaining for you.
Yeah. I don't know about them, but for me, I'm having fun. No, I'm sure they're having fun. But so, when I remember when I still have the original manuscript that you sent me. So from Dirty Words on Clean Skin. Yep. It's in my drawer over there.
Well, I was able to make that into a success. But again, that was the same idea of having to find forward momentum or make forward momentum from a standing position. And I figured out how to do that and make that a success. Now, as an entrepreneur, I'm having to do the same thing, but in an entirely different way, because even though the other book was narrative nonfiction and it is a memoir of sorts, it's, it's an entirely different bit. This is a straight memoir. So the audience that I had built is not necessarily there for me in the same way, because they don't experience me this way. So I've got to open myself up and find new inroads to find a new audience and let them experience me a new way. I mean, in my own way, I'm still writing about women's empowerment because, that journey with my mother was very empowering for me. And strangely enough, even though she was she was like the anti-feminist. She was just so not that, or would never consider herself that. But that's kind of how I learned to stand up for myself, standing up for her. I learned to stand up for both of us. And that, I think, is also something that's a very important part of this book, and it's very dear to me. That I learned to stand up for her and myself in this process. And had I not stepped back to examine that relationship and question, also challenge her views of the world. Some things I did to help her, and some things I did in spite of her. But that's also what this book is about. If I hadn't gone through that experience, then I wouldn't have learned to stand up for myself.
Yeah, and I remember that one part where, you told them not to change her medication, and they did.
Oh my God, yes.
I felt that to my core, and I felt that's what I love about your writing, is that you feel it. You can feel, I felt your frustration. I felt your anger. You were fucking mad. I mean, you said, do not change the medication, and they did. And it's like, the fact that your mother had the champion that she had, she had no idea. She was so fortunate, because so many people don't. I don't know. So during COVID, I ended up hospitalized because of it, after the fact. And we didn't know, Heather didn't know the questions to ask. We didn't know, here I am, me, powerhouse, in a hospital bed, and they're messing with my blood pressure medication, almost killing me, because they didn't realize, she's allergic to it. And I'm like, did you read my chart and see that I'm allergic? So when I read that, I was like, oh my God, thank God you were there for that, because so many people don't have that.
I'm so sorry that you went through that. And this just it just rings so many bells for me, because I remember, and a lot of people tell me they're inspired by that particular chapter. I thought, I was acting like a nut, but I didn't care, because I felt like, what are you doing to my mother? I mean, this is, there's also a commentary about elder care in this country, but it's not only elder care. You went through the same experience. And I always wonder about that. Well, who's going to have as big a mouth as I do? Who's going to champion me if I'm ever in that situation? And, my mother was curled up in a ball. I forbade the doctors to change her medication. And some guy, it's cookie cutter medicine. I mean, some guy, because he's reading a chart, well, she's this old and therefore she should only have this many milligrams of this thing. And so he just went, and after knowing her for all of 5 minutes, this was not her primary care physician. This was some shrink or whatever. She was on antipsychotic medication because she was having hallucinations. And he just decided to cut her meds by 60%. To the point that when I came to see her, she was curled up in a ball.
Yeah.
And it was even looking at me as though I were doing something bad to her. And I did. I threw a tantrum in the middle of the place. I'm surprised they didn't put a straitjacket on me. But you know what? I got in touch with her doctor and they fixed the situation. So, and I think that that's also, a byproduct, or hopefully a bonus of reading this too, is just I have respect for the medical profession, but not so much respect that I'm not going to trust myself. Because you know what, as someone's caregiver or as your partner, you know what I mean? And they know you and they know your case better than any doctor who's going to stand there to see you for 5 minutes. I mean, they're doing rounds. They have how many people to serve? And if you're dealing with somebody who's in an elder care situation, they have a binder that's like 4 inches thick. And that everyone who touches the patient has to put a note in that binder. So how would they possibly keep that all straight? So having somebody who is, in the family who is a champion, don't be afraid to speak up. That was another thing, even being thrown on my head in the process that I learned about all of this. Don't be afraid to speak up.
Yeah. And it's like I'm just going through like every chapter in my head because it was just a whole, the whole elderly caregiving part. You ended up having to have surgery, and I remember that. I remember. I don't know if we spoke right after you had it. I remember you told me that you had to go for it, and then I spoke to you after it. And it's so weird because I think back on it and I had no idea what was going on in the background. Like you never really talked about your mom. We never really. So it kind of blows my mind that, I'm reading the book and I'm going, oh shit, I had like no idea that you were going through this on top of all the other stuff.
Well, that's also my upbringing. I mean, and I think that's true for a lot of people. You're just sort of taught to soldier on, and I'm like one of those hamsters that go around the wheel, and I'm like, what's next? I just have to do what's next, because if I didn't, I wouldn't get through it. So I really didn't have time to dwell. I needed neck surgery. I'm fine now, by the way. See, my neck, everything works just great. But at the time, I mean, that was really, yeah, that was quite the epic procedure. And it's like, well, that's another issue that people who are caregivers face, because you're no spring chicken either. And then you're having to take care of an elderly parent. Well, what do you do? How do you take care of them when you're not feeling so great?
Right.
So I think that that's something, obviously I shared it. It's part of the memoir, it's an integral part of the experience. But I think that's also something that's helpful for somebody else to read. Yep. It's just what was my journey? What did I do so that you don't feel like you're alone in that process? Because there's certainly no should in the book whatsoever. It's just, well, this is how I fell on my behind, and then I got up and I fell down again and I got up. So, but at least whatever you're doing, you feel like, oh, I got a buddy. I have a buddy through all of this, and you'll be entertained in the process. It's like I was talking about the beginning of the book. I was just trying to get my mother ready for Christmas. And she was always complaining about the lighting in her new assisted living facility. And it's just, the very first time you meet her with the accent you talked about, but you cannot see a thing in that place. How can it be so dark for human beings? Human beings. So
human beings, yes.
She was quite something. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. I remember, the shoes, and she's like, I don't like them.
Oh yeah, that was the biggest battle. I mean, but you don't understand. I didn't really talk about this in the book, but I had enlisted. I think that everybody in my life, one way or another, was involved with my mother's shoes, because my mother liked very feminine high heels. She wanted to wear stiletto heels, and it's like, Ma, you're in your 70s, you're in your 80s. You can't wear these shoes anymore. So I would take her shoe shopping. I do not like those shoes. I will not wear those shoes. And so, she was just, it was impossible to please her. And I had a whole list of, okay, 1.5 inches with the strap across the thing and the heel and the narrow heel and the big toe and and it's like, it didn't matter what I tried to do. So I think that was just sort of an easy battle because we were avoiding the hard ones. But, we did eventually, that was kind of what happened in the book too. We wound up dealing with the hard ones. We dealt with all of it. But the shoes were another epic. Taking her shoe shopping was a real nightmare. I wrote about this, that there's a billboard on Hollywood Boulevard with a bunch of stiletto heels. I mean, these had to be 5-inch heels with feathers. It was the most ridiculous. What woman can wear these shoes without falling over? And the caption read, "It doesn't hurt if it's pretty." Yes, it does. So
there's no way in hell. I remember we were going somewhere. Where the hell were we going? I don't know. And I was like, I'm going to try on a pair of heels. And I went into the shoe store and I tried
can't do it anymore.
Not anymore. I could never freaking do it. I'm talking, I was 35, maybe 38 or something like that. And I was like, everyone else can wear them. I'm going to put these on. And did you see Jumpin' Jack Flash with Whoopi Goldberg? I mean, that's how I looked. I had these heels on.
Yes.
And I just cannot balance on them. And I was like leaning on the shoe sales guy because,
I live in Skechers now. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I live
in Skechers because, as I like to say, I live in Skechers now because I like to say I have menopause feet. And people don't understand what that means. So I will explain it to you. But menopause feet, as a good friend of mine once said, when the collagen goes, it's bone on bone. So that's what it feels like. You just feel like where's the foot? I mean, when I was 20, I could wear 4-inch heels and go walk through the entire city and never have any pain, but not anymore. Those days are over.
Wow. I was wondering what that was. Because for me, I never wore heels. I just never wore heels. And it was funny because
because in my business I had to,
Well, you had to, right?
As an actor, you have to. Yeah.
I came out in 1981, 82, I don't know, whatever it was. And I was told you either have to be butch or femme. And if you were femme, you had to wear dresses and high heels. And if you were butch, you could wear jeans and whatever. And I was like, I'll be butch. But then I realized
one way or the other. But I don't really get that. But it's like,
because back then,
do what you want. I know.
Because back then, that's how it kind of was. You were a little bit more masculine and you had a feminine girlfriend or whatever. But then in my 20s, as I grew more into myself, I just was preppy. And so I always wore penny loafers and khakis and, stuff like that. So I just came into my own style. But in the very beginning, they were very stringent about it. And it was kind of crazy. Now, it's not like that anymore. But I remember I was like, there's no way I'm wearing heels. But anyway, so, okay, so your mom. So you got through the heel. Well, you never really did get through the heel thing because she, I know that she acquiesced, but she didn't really want to.
No, look. It's always tenuous. And I think that that's the bottom line when you're reinventing a relationship with a parent. It's going to be tough because the control mechanism is shifting. You become your parent's parent. They're not going to like that. So there's always going to be this bristling for control. And so the arguments over the shoes, that was just a cover, you know what I mean, for what was really going on with, right. I don't have control over my life the same way I did. That's really what that's about.
Yeah. I mean, for her, and I obviously didn't know her, but getting to know her through the book, she was very, independent, and she was very, I don't need anybody's help. I can do this all myself. And then I think when you had to help her, and it hit her that maybe I'm not as young as I used to be. Maybe, I do need help. That, for her, that just had to be so hard. And then for you to see her like that and then be put in that role that, yes, you have to be the caregiver, but now not only are you the caregiver, you're the one that's going to get all the shit because you are being the caregiver and you're.
Well, but it puts you in touch. Yeah, it puts you in touch with your own vulnerability too, because I always thought of my mother as perpetually young. So you don't think of a parent as aging. I don't know what I was thinking about, but it never occurred to me that would ever happen. So as she got older, then you start to get in touch with your own vulnerability too, because you realize, well, we're all going there. We're all there. And I think that was also something that was valuable for me in writing the book in the first place, is that I saw my own vulnerability and it became more okay, because I just, by understanding her journey, I got to understand my own better. And the other thing is, I admired my mom. I really admired the fact that this was, unlike my dad, who was a highly educated person. My mother was working from when she was a teenager. She was, lived through World War II. She was not an educated person, but she managed to find a way to will herself into any job, and she took care of her family. She did everything she could to entertain us, to take care of us. And I think that just knowing that etched my loyalty to her in stone. And I would never abandon her for that reason. And even though there were times that it was difficult, but it was me or bust. That was it.
Yeah, but you did an amazing job. I mean, just reading that. And I know that you were kind of like feeling your way around in the dark to figure stuff out, but you did it, and I think that, I keep saying, I think that when I was reading, how she would look at you as if this was your fault and you were doing this to her, like how that made you feel. Because that just must have, you're like, I'm doing everything that I can and you don't see this. And I just felt
it was, but at a certain point, my husband David really nailed it, because he said, you know what, she feels safer with you than anyone on earth. So of course you're the one she's going to vent to. You're the one she's going to expose all this to everyone else. My mother always put on a happy face. She would not show anybody. She never wanted to make a problem. She didn't want to take up time and space. So she always wanted to act like, she was very charming to all her doctors. Everything was fine. But I think that's also part of, you ruined my life and you stole my bra. That's why I wrote it, because it's like, you get to lift the skirt up of that, and look at what's really going on underneath. And I think that is healing. I think that it was healing for me, and I'm hoping it's healing for anybody who chooses to read it, because you start to look at that parent a different way, because otherwise you're still the 15-year-old angry kid still feeling powerless at everything that they say to you. But the fact of the matter is, you can't walk into this new phase of your life feeling like that, because the stress it puts on you is just too much. So by being able to step back and look at them in a different way, that in itself is not only healing, it's empowering. And, that I think was another motivation for me in going from point A to point B, to complete the journey with her, and to share it with people.
Yeah. So speaking of journey, I'm just going to get into entrepreneurship for a second, because that's what this is about. But as I know, because we could talk about the book for like the next, and it's almost an hour already. But what in your career, and you had like a couple of careers, what's an obstacle that you've overcome that somebody who's an entrepreneur might be going through? Like, what was something that, you had to get through the other side of?
I think that's a great question. I think a lot of it is just the changing landscape. I think it's really tough today in what I don't know if it's still called the gig economy, because there used to be there were established gatekeepers. Let's say even as a writer, there's publishers and but and literary agents, and now a lot of that it's not that it's removed, but people are not allowing themselves to be stopped if those gatekeepers don't say yes, because a lot of times they're looking for, well, what's a sure buck? It's the same thing in the TV business. I mean, most of my career had been in television, and later in my career, I think I got a little turned off to the fact that, they want to know how many Twitter followers you have, because they're dying for market share. It's the same in any business. So I think that one of the big obstacles is branding, learning how to brand yourself and learning how to have your own voice and not waiting for somebody else to do it for you. I think that in today's market, and I think this applies to any business, you're stuck doing that. You're stuck, oh, I have to have a brand. I have to have a stand. I have to have, how am I going to market myself? I have to have a YouTube channel. And I think that there's so many different outlets that are possible that may be perceived as an obstacle. It doesn't have to be, but I think that, it's our job as entrepreneurs to sort of educate ourselves to what are the different possibilities out there. And I think when I wrote the first book, that was an obstacle that I overcame in figuring out, because I first hired a publicist and they really didn't, I don't want to say anything. It didn't really work out. And I hired a second group that was much more helpful to me and got me on a lot more radio and TV appearances, and got the word out there, and a lot of other writing opportunities, so that people can see you in one vein, and then that makes them glom on to another thing. Now the market has changed again. So I think it's really about, as an entrepreneur, willingness. I think a lot of overcoming an obstacle is about willingness to be fluid and to say, well, what's being done now? How can I put the word out there about myself? And also to be courageous. So there's an old saying, what would you do if you weren't afraid? I think that a lot of the problem I've had in the past is, as poised as people tell me that I am out there, I don't necessarily see that. It doesn't mean you don't get shaking, scared on the bed when you think, oh my God, I have to stand up in front of people and do this. So I think we're much harder on ourselves than we need to be. And you'd be surprised by how many people out there will applaud your courage, because you have the guts to stand up there and share your product, share what you do, just want to connect with people. So I think that's how I overcame certain obstacles as an actor, as a solo performer, because that's a whole other thing. That's not just acting, because you're still producing your own material. That's very entrepreneurial too. And I remember one story I really would like to share with your audience is that when I was doing The Devil Takes a Wife, that my husband directed and did a stunning job on, frankly. One night, a dear friend of ours, he was volunteering at a Covenant House with teenage kids who had family abuse problems, drug abuse problems. All these kids were about 16, 17 years old. And they were the audience one night. He brought 20 of them to see the show. And so they were a lot of who had come there. I don't know. It was an earlier version of the show, so it was kind of elliptical. I don't know if they got what I was doing. But they were so glued because they knew that it meant so much to me to communicate with them. And after the show, they were all coming up and hugging me. I was shocked by it. But it's probably one of the best performances I've ever given in my life, because we wanted so much to reach each other and to communicate. And I guess that I'm sharing that with you because I don't care what business you're in. People really respond to sincerity and to honesty. And when someone can sense that you really are who you say you are, and you want to reach out to them, and you care about the product that you have to share, they resonate to that. And I think that's the way to overcome a lot of obstacles, is not to be so afraid of, oh, I'm not dressed perfect and my stupid bangs are not right. And all of this crap, not worry about well, it's true. I'm an actor. I'm vain. I'm like my mother. I know I'm my mother's daughter. So I know that I worry about, well, if my nose were just a little, and if my shirt was better, and then I would be perfect. If I just wrote the query letter just a little more perfectly, then it would be perfect. Do you know what I mean? So I think that people respond to someone who is authentic and who they know that person really wants to reach you. And I think that's the way to overcome a lot of obstacles, no matter what walk of life you're in.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that, because one of the biggest things, last year I was, I'm in a bunch of LinkedIn pods now, and we all, post like a few times a week, whatever. And I did a thing a few weeks ago on being your authentic self. And people, back in the day, you had to have this facade because it wasn't acceptable if you were you. And now the opposite is true. Now it's, if you're not you, people know it. And people are working with you. Like,
they smell it. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, but my business is what it is. Like, my website is all me. If you would have told me, like, when we redid it and I rebranded, my designer was like, it needs to be you. And I was like, I'm not comfortable with my picture on there, and she's like, they want to work with you. It has to be you.
It's tough. I get it. Yeah.
Right? But what
it's tough because you're worried, like, it's too much me, and who wants to see so much me? I get it.
But they do. And so, and I've gotten jobs because of it. They're like, I saw your website, I saw you, and you're the same there as you are on LinkedIn and on your podcast, and you're you. There's no facade here. I don't have a business persona. I don't even have a stage persona anymore. I get on stage and I sing. This is it. Except I'm singing rock and roll or whatever I'm singing, right? It is what it is. But I think the beauty of it is that, we are all, I'm in this networking group called the Dames, and we've met each other virtually a million times. We got to meet in person last month, and it was like nothing was different. The only thing that was different was that we could actually hug each other, and, we were in 3D instead of 2D, but we were the same people because we are who we are. There's no cover, and that's what people are drawn to. So, so we're at an hour already, which I'm not shocked because we can always talk for hours, but is there anything that you want to leave the audience with?
I just want to say that it really is an honor and a privilege to be here, and I've enjoyed this hour immensely. And I hope people will give a shot to You Ruined My Life and You Stole My Bra, because it really is an entertaining and moving and unusual journey. And it was a joy to write it. It was a joy to write it, and I hope that people will walk away with a little bit of the cathartic experience that I had, and that they take that away in their own lives.
Awesome. I'm going to ask you one more question before we leave, but
yes, ma'am.
So You Ruined My Life and You Stole My Bra. You can get it on Amazon.
Yes.
I have the book. I have it on Kindle because I can't read in bed because my dogs try to eat the book. So I have it on Kindle also. But it was just such an amazing, and I'm not saying this because Anita and I are friends. This was such a well-written, touching and moving book that if you want to read a great story and go on a great journey, get the book. So the last question I ask all my guests is, what lights your fire?
What lights my fire? You light my fire, baby. No, but what lights my fire is writing. What lights my fire is creativity. I can sit there and noodle with a paragraph for hours, and I'm so happy. I think, what would make me happy is to sit out under a pergola with my laptop and, my green tea and just write for hours. I think what lights my fire about that is because I'm independent. You know what I mean? I like the freedom to go where the words take me. And that's the last thing I'll say about writing a book. Once you write the book starts writing you. This took me in places that I didn't necessarily plan on. And that's also the adventure. That's the adventure of it.
Cool. All right. Well, don't go anywhere. Thank you so much for taking the time and the time out of your day and just spending the time with me and my audience. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience and I'll be right back.
Thank you so
Everybody,
much.
thank you. No, thank you. Thank you all so much for hanging in for an hour plus again. I know this was a little bit different than the usual format, but it was really important to me to give Anita this platform and get this book out there, because it is, there's just so much in it that we can glean from, you know, elderly care to our journey, right? From, you know, being the kid to the parent to, just get it. Because if I talk about it, I'm going to give like stuff away, and I don't want to. But that's why this was a little bit different. And Anita is just, she's lovely. And I wish I could have met Tony. That would have been pretty awesome. So, but I hope that you have enjoyed this. As always, you know, like, share, subscribe, download, and give us a review. You know, let us know what you think, you know, of the episode. We're at over 2,600 downloads, which I can't even believe. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to our sponsor, Novia Behavioral Health. Feel better. Yeah, so thank you guys. I appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, go out and find what lights your fire. See ya.